Thank you. Again, thank you everyone for joining us today. This CRP workshop is being hosted by Michigan Conservation District's Farm Bill Biologists. And Kurt Wolf will be going into a little more detail about who our partners are and where we get funding. But briefly, to explain, there are 5 of us located across southern Michigan, as you can see here on the map. And if you're looking at the map and if you're sad that one of your county is not highlighted, don't worry. Most conservation programs are offered statewide, and we can always provide technical assistance to any of you and also just point you in the right direction and get you in contact with your local USDA Service Center and Conservation District. But we are based in these counties because they were identified by the Michigan Pheasant Restoration Initiative, or MPRI, as having the highest potential for restoring good quality pheasant habitat, which is grasslands. I think Laura is going to drop a link to the MPRI website for more information. But the Michigan Pheasant Restoration Initiative is a collaboration of many different local, state, and federal agencies and conservation organizations. And the goal is to increase and enhance pheasant habitat across Michigan in order to increase pheasant populations and in turn increase pheasant hunting opportunities. The initiative began with a focus on pheasants, but pheasant habitat again is grasslands, which consist of a wide variety of things like cool season grasses such as timothy, or warm season grasses like big blue stem and switchgrass, or wildflowers or shrubs. All of that stuff is just really good habitat for other wildlife species like deer or songbirds or pollinators like monarchs. So if you're not a hunter, but you just really love wildlife, or maybe you're a hunter, but you don't hunt pheasants, or you're just wanting to address something like soil erosion on your property, establishing vegetation on your landscape that benefits pheasants will also address all of these other things as well. So our role as Farm Bill Biologists is to carry out the mission of MPRI by connecting landowners with conservation programs like CRP, which is exactly why we are hosting this workshop today to educate you all about CRP. And we also connect landowners with other landowners that have similar goals, because maybe you have a few acres on your property that you're wanting to restore, but you don't think it's a whole lot to make a huge impact. But any amount is certainly going to make an impact. But if your neighbor also restores habitat on their property, it has an even bigger overall impact on wildlife and creating that kind of connectivity. So yeah, to start introducing who we are, my name is Alyssa Winters, and I work for the Blue Water Conservation District. I cover Sanilac and Lapeer counties. My conservation district also services landowners in Macomb and St. Clair counties, so I can also help you out if you are from one of those counties. And I've been in the role for a little bit less than a year. And I will pass it on to Barry now to introduce himself.
Hi, my name is Barry Weldon, and I service Tuscola County and Huron County. I work out of Tuscola County and Caro. I haven't been on the job for a year. I've been on the job for 11 whole days. So I'm very new, but am more than willing to help answer questions, help anyone out who contacts me, or do my very best to point you to the right person who can answer your questions. So that's a little bit about me, and I turn it over to Kurt, I believe.
Hello, everyone. I'd like to welcome everyone to tonight's webinar. I'm Kurt Wolf. I am the Farm Bill Biologist that's out of the Gratiot County office in Ithaca. I also cover Clinton County and Saginaw counties. Just a little background on me. I've been the Farm Bill Biologist for a little over 6 years now in the mid-Michigan area. Prior to that, I worked with the DNR as a non-career wildlife assistant as I went through my school at a MSU where I studied fisheries and wildlife. And got a bachelor's degree through them with my conservation or concentration in conservation. So this type of work has been right up my alley for what I wanted to go to school with and follow a career. As you'll notice, we also have a location and branch conservation district that's vacant. Again, if you have any questions regarding CRP there, feel free to reach out to any of us. We're more than willing to help you with that. Same thing if you're a neighboring county and you don't happen to have a farm bill biologist, we are always willing to give technical assistance to you, get you pointed in the right direction. We're basically the liaisons to a lot of these programs, and we want to make sure that you have a successful conservation plan when it's all said and done. So with that introduction, I think I'm going to hand this over to Laura. She can introduce herself and get us started.
Hey there, everybody. Great to see so many faces able to join here and for this evening session. I'm Laura. I work out of the Lenawee County Conservation District in Adrian. I also serve Hillsdale and Monroe counties, and I've been here for about a year now. I have a pretty broad background in natural resources and in farming, and I love working on grassland restoration. Grasslands are actually a critically endangered habitat in the US, so it's really exciting work to be doing. A fun fact about me is that I'm actually very close to the due date of my first baby, and so we've got our contact information everywhere and encouraging you to contact us. And I just wanted to let people know I will be in the office, planning to be in the office up through this Friday. And then after that, for anything that's sort of time sensitive, you'll want to reach out to other people. Maybe it's another farm biologist, or it's others in your local USDA service center, which at the end, we're going to give you a link where you can easily find who your local service center staff are if you don't already know those folks. Lastly, I want to mention that I'm going to be making a recorded version of a workshop that I did about a month ago where I covered a few other programs in addition to CRP. So email me if you would like to be sent that link once I've posted it, which hopefully will be sometime later this spring. It might be really helpful to you if you find that you're not necessarily eligible for CRP. There are other programs that are potentially available as well. So let me know if you'd like a link to that recording once it's available. So without further ado, I'll be handing it back over to Kurt, who's going to be doing the meat of our presentation today. Hopefully it'll take about a half hour or no more than that, so that we have lots of time for your questions. And like Alyssa said, please drop those in the chat as we go while it's fresh on your mind, and we will address those first during the Q&A, and then hopefully we'll have time to open it up for potentially unmuting and asking questions as well. So take it away, Kurt.
All right, thank you, Laura. Just for reference, this slide here will be at the end of the presentation too, so where you can get our contact info. All right, so let's get started. So before we get going into a lot of it, I do want to let people know that there are a lot of other program opportunities for conservation. This one that we're talking about tonight is going to be the general CRP enrollment. So if at any point you feel that you don't fit in, or maybe something with eligibility doesn't work for you, there's always a lot of wiggle room with that, or potentially we could move you to a different program or assist with that. So here's kind of a list of a few of the other programs that are offered through CRP or through our partners. We have continuous CRP, which is offered year round. We have CREP, which came back, some CRP grasslands, SAFE. Our partners with NRCS offer EQIP, CSP, a few other things. Fish and Wildlife Services has a partners program. DNR can have a private lands program. Some of the funds come, some of them go. We're kind of stuck with the Farm Bill, but there's a lot of different opportunities. So if you don't think that the general is a fit for you, at least stay tuned to the end, have some questions for us, and maybe we could point you in the right direction by the end of today's webinar. All right, so kicking us off, Conservation Reserve Program. The general sign up, we are in CRP sign up 58. when we're talking about the general. So this is kind of just terminology that FSA and some of the other partners use. But this sign up opened up on January 31st here of 2022. And the deadline to get an offer in to your farm service agency is going to be March 11th. So we know we're kind of on a tight crunch here. That's why we wanted to have these webinars as soon as possible to get some questions answered, to also give you kind of the tools and information that you're going to need to prepare yourself when you do make an appointment with farm service agency. So the partners, this is kind of who makes conservation possible. When we're talking with CRP, we'll just go right down the list there. FSA is basically the main contacts for farms, or the farm service agencies, the main contact for CRP. It's the program that they handle. It's run through them, through the Farm Bill. So they are basically the holders of these contracts, but they use a lot of these partners here, DNR, NRCS, and Michigan Conservation Districts to run them. So NRCS's role in the CRP practice is to help landowners with more of the technical aspect of it. So they help you out with developing the actual conservation plan, which will have planting dates, tools, kind of the how, what, when, where of actually implementing it. And they will be the ones that will help you out down the road as well when it comes time to having any questions with the planting. How did it take? Do you need to do anything else? They're there to help you with that. The DNR is a big part in this as well. What we have tonight for DNR, I believe Mike Parker is on with us as well. He's the Conservation Partners Program Specialist. He is also the one that handles the Farm Bill Biologists. As ourselves here, we are technically an employee of the conservation districts, but working with Mike and the DNR, we are strictly hunter dollar funded. So we want to make sure when we're doing a lot of these CRP practices that we're choosing the best species of grass, legumes, and forbs. We want to make sure that what we're doing on the landscape is actually going to impact wildlife in a positive way, because we know what we do on the CRP grounds. It's going to have a trickle effect. We know a lot of these game species, such as deer and turkey and pheasants, they don't respect property boundaries, so they are free to travel across the landscape. So we know if we do a better job with our CRP, we're definitely going to provide better hunting opportunities for the landowners. So this jumps into kind of the main point of what a lot of people are here for CRP. The driving factor is going to be kind of the financial incentives. Is this going to make sense for your farming operation, for your goals that you have in the lifestyle? So I just want to briefly touch on some of the financial incentives. I don't really want to give any rental rates because it's very dependent on case by case. But typically what we do is Farm Service Agency will look at your top 3 soils that are in the acreage that you want to enroll in CRP, and they will come out with county average, and that will determine your soil rental rate. So that would be the annual payment that you would receive every year from this. So when we're looking at CRP, it's basically a landowner contract with the federal government to lease their land of taking it out of production and putting it into a permanent cover. So when we're talking about these rental rates, it's not just a get paid, put the practice in and walk away. It's something that we want the landowners to be involved with throughout the contract. So that payment is also reflecting your participation in the health of the stand, keeping out invasive species, any damages that happen to occur to the stand. Say, county comes in and dredges the ditch and puts the spoils up. Part of that is for you to help work with getting equipment or with somebody else to help remove some of that stuff, unless the drain commission handles that for you. So it's really a payment that's in there for you to be the manager of it. It's not something that you just set it and forget it and never come back to it. We definitely don't want that. We want to make sure that you have a successful contract with us and that you're happy with the outcome of it, that it goes as smoothly as possible. Along with the annual rental rates is the cost share on establishment. So Farm Service Agency offers a 50% cost share for the establishment, which is set to a pre-specified cost amount that they basically look at as a do not exceed. So for example, if you're putting in, we'll say a grass field, and they say it's going to be $200 an acre to plant it, you would get 50% of that cost shared if you spend the 200. So if it's $200 an acre, you spend 200, they would reimburse you 100. But if it's $200 an acre and you got a really good deal, or you're able to do something and only costs you $100, they won't give you 100. They'll give you half of that 100. So then you'll get 50. So that's where that not to exceed 100% of producers out-of-pocket expense comes into play. That's the same thing if you partner with somebody else, or if someone donates equipment or donates seed or their labor or anything like that. You only get 50% of the actual incurred cost to the landowner. So that's just something to keep in mind. So now we'll move on to kind of the eligibility. So this is really going to be the first look when you talk with FSA. They're going to go over some of these items with you to see if you qualify for the general program. And they're going to look at your eligibility of your cropping history. That's kind of the main one. So what we're looking at here is from 4 years between 2012 to 2017, they want to have cropping history. So typically that's done if you certify with FSA each year, or if the farmer that works your land is the one that certifies for it. If you don't have that, or you've never certified with FSA, there are different ways around that. So don't just count yourself out. You can work with the county committee, write letters, have other people who will testify that it has been cropped. Maybe you have some different slips or information that shows that there was a row crop during those years. They can work with you on that. So don't count yourself out if you didn't certify with FSA for 4 out of those 6 years there. Another one is the land must be physical and legally capable of being planted. And what they're describing by that would be, for example, physically able to plant it. Say if somebody comes by and they want to enroll a field, but they decide to scalp all the topsoil off and sell that off, and then try to enroll into a program because they're not going to touch anymore. That would be something where we know the species would not take on the the subsurface soils if we have the topsoil away. So that'd be something where physically we wouldn't be able to plant there. Same thing if there's a building on site or a driveway in an area and we physically can't plant it, those acres aren't eligible. And then the legal capability of it is basically you have to be the owner of the land. We want to see a deed, and that goes into the last part where you have to be the owner of the land for at least 12 months before the time of the CRP offer. But again, if any of these are questionable in your mind, please talk with FSA. There's definitely different ways around some of this. We want to make sure you have a good contract. We want to make sure that it's not going to be something that's going to pop up down the road and cause issues for you. So moving in a little bit further with the general CRP sign up is that it is point-based sign up. So this is a national program. So you're competing with everybody else across the nation. It's not a specifically, geared for one state to the other. Everybody's kind of got the same opportunity. So we want to try to get you to score as high of points as you can. So some of these little topics here are little tips to help you prepare yourself when you go in to talk with FSA. Kind of arm yourself with some of the questions that you might want to have, or have you start planning ahead of time of where you might want some of these additional points added. So first we can go through with the cover type. So most of the CRP is going to offer a what they would call like a low mix and a high mix. So you're either going to have a mix, for example, that might have 1 grass and 1 legume, and that would be a lower point mix, and the higher point might be 4 grasses and 2 legumes. So there's a little bit of variance in between those, but it's nothing drastic. But that's kind of the best way to get a little bit more points, is going for the most diverse mix you can, depending on what practice you're using. Another good way to do it would be implementing an enhancement like a CP12, which is a wildlife food plot. Those can get you extra EBI points when you're working with FSA. Again, that's something that you'd want to come armed with. Make sure that you know where you want it on the property. Know ahead of time if that's something that you want to put in those practices, because not all CRP practices allow food plots. So it's just something that you want to make sure you bring up on your first visit with FSA to see if you can get some more points if it's eligible. The next one would be a CP42 pollinator planting, which that one is basically, I liken that to an insect fruit lot. Basically, you're just going to have a very diverse planting of wildflowers. So you're providing that nectar for pollinators as they make a lot of their migrations, like with monarchs. So it's another one where you're going to want to come armed with to your visit where you want them. Potentially, if you're able to put that in the program, that's something that you just want to have in your in your pocket ahead of time to just prepare yourself for. That one gets you quite a bit of points, so it's something that it's really sought after to look at adding that if you're getting pretty low on the point scale. Another one would be trying to offer lands that's highly erodible. FSA would classify those as HEL on your maps when you get it from them. A lot of other grounds will be NHEL for non-highly erodible. If you're able to offer up acres that are in the highly erodible areas on your map, they get you more points, because what we're looking at there is kind of trying to heal the land. We're looking to take stuff out of production that's not your high production fields. We're looking to get you to enroll land that's low value to low production. You're kind of putting money into it. Maybe there's some specific resource concerns. You're getting too much erosion, either wind or rain. So those will get you a lot more points if you're in kind of grounds that have potential to erode highly. The last one is to offer a below maximum rental rate. That one I typically tell people to save for the last. If they don't think they're scoring enough points, again, FSA, they'll kind of tell you if you're competitive or not with the points by the time you get to the end of your offer. One thing to note is that these are for the life of the contract. So if you offer a lower rental rate, if things change next year or 2 years, or a new soil rental rate comes out, you're still locked into what you agreed to. So we just want to make sure that people understand when they are changing some of these, increasing the diversity of the mix or putting a fruit plot in, that those are there for the life of the contract, be it 10 or 15 years. So make sure it's something that you're comfortable with and it's in a location that you are happy with inside your planting. So I'll talk a little bit about kind of the wildlife aspect. This is more of what us Farm Bill biologists really like to look at. Again, we are paid, funded through the DNR by hunter dollars. So we want to make sure that the best cover is on the landscape to provide the best output for game species. But we'll do a little intro with the CRP. So it was started in 1985. It's basically the largest conservation program in the world for conserving soil, water, air, and wildlife. It's super successful. We happen to have farm bills every couple of years. We're currently in the 2018 Farm Bill. So if some of the dates and stuff seem kind of weird when we're throwing out stuff like cropping history between 2012 and 2017, that's why we're talking about those. So the dates might seem a little strange, but we're expected to have another one coming out in 2023. So this is kind of our last chance here to get into a general CRP sign up. So we'll talk a little bit about the practices here, kind of give you an overview. So with the CRP general sign up, we like to use a lot of these acronyms, CP1, CP2, so on and so forth. So basically that's Conservation Practice 1. We'll dive into detail on each and every one of these. But I just wanted to have this slide up here to kind of show there's difference in contract lengths. So some you're allowed to do 10 years, some you're allowed to do 15. There's also some difference in some of them that allow for an enrollment again, which we call re-enrollment. So after 10 years, if there's another sign up, you potentially could re-enroll that ground again. Other ones, such as like the CP3A hardwood planting, those don't allow you to keep re-enrolling. So there's difference with that. That's something that you want to ask FSA when you're talking with them too, that after this contract is over, what's my next step? You want to make sure you're planning for that. Are you planning to put it back into production? Are you planning to re-enroll it? Maybe there's going to be a change with your farming operation. Maybe it's going to get passed down to the next generation and you just kind of want something stable at the moment to keep it locked up while the kids go through college. So these are all kinds of questions and stuff we want you armed with when you come talk with FSA to help you make the best decision. So without further ado, let's jump into each one of these practices, kind of give you an overview. So the first one, CP1, this is our introduced grasses and legumes. These are cool season introduced grasses. This is kind of what I would call the entry level CRP practice. If you were to look into the general, it's going to be kind of the most cost effective method per acre. It's also the most forgiving for people who are trying to establish grasslands. With these, we're looking at introduced species of grass such as timothy, orchard, maybe even red top, and a mix of legumes, so clovers and alfalfa. The good thing about this is since they are cool season plantings, we get 2 growing periods per year. So you can expect these to grow in the spring, set seed in the summer, and then grow again in the fall, and set seed again after that. So you have a lot more opportunities for them to grow, a lot more opportunities for a second window if the weather's not cooperating when you're planting. So it's definitely a more forgiving type of planting. It also can mature within the first year. So you don't have to sit there and wait for biannual plants that may take a couple years before they germinate, or ones that take a long time to grow and actually be established. These can be established within the first year and basically good to go. So some of the opportunities this offers for wildlife, if you're more in, say, deer hunting, to definitely increase kind of your legumes within the mix, get you that higher point rating. That would provide more browse for deer. Same thing with if you're a pheasant hunter and you want good nesting cover. This is excellent nesting cover. It's the first thing that kind of greens up in the spring. Provides good cover there for them to get away from some animals and nest. It also provides high levels of protein with all the legumes in there. They definitely attract insects. So little turkey poults and pheasant chicks definitely like to cruise through there to grub and get little bugs. So it's definitely a good wildlife planting, but this would be the entry level one is what I would liken it to. Next, we'll talk a little bit more advanced planting. So this would be a CP2, which is a native grass and wildflower planting. So the difference between the CP1 and the CP2, the native grasses, they are a warm season plant, typically grow starting in June. So you have that one growing period. They take a little bit longer to get established. The root systems are a lot more advanced on these native plants. So it may take 2 to 3 years before you actually have a really good stand going. The plus side on that is, it may be a little bit more work up front to get it going, but once they are established, they're native, they're used to the weather patterns that we have, they're used to the animal browsing pressure that we have. So they're definitely a lot more competitive to invasives. So these are ones that are, although it might be a little harder to get started, once you get them going, they're a little bit less maintenance year after year, that you don't have to worry too much about stuff. It works out pretty good. This provides excellent bedding cover for deer. It's great escape cover for pheasants. It also helps water infiltration. So if you have issues, with water ponding a lot on areas where they come off, this can help out with water infiltration. The root systems on plants like this, for example, switchgrass, could go 10 feet below subsurface. So it really helps out with the clean water, air, soil, and wildlife benefits. But again, a little bit more work up front, but it'll definitely pay dividends as it goes. Again, this will get you higher points than the CP1, just because we know it's a little more work from the landowners. It provides a little bit more benefit, and being that it's native helps it score a little bit higher. So this is definitely a great way to go if you're looking at grasslands. Next, we'll jump into some of the tree planting. So we have a CP3. This is a conifer planting. So this is going to be your spruce and pine plantings. Again, this is something that's getting a little more advanced. I typically tell people if they're looking at something on a tree planting, that this would be a spot where they would look to find a smaller area per se. Maybe they have a woodlot that they want to straighten out a little area with. They can't get their equipment in this narrow spot. So it's beneficial for them to kind of plant some trees, straighten it out. It wasn't very productive. They can get that in there, because with the tree plantings, there's more upfront payment or cost incurred by the landowner. So with these, we're looking at trees that we will go through a suitability index and help you pick out species that are appropriate for the soils. And with that, you're going to have tree protectors or tree tubes on each tree. We'd like to see 80% survivability, typically after the third year and every year after that. where the landowner could be responsible to replace the dead and dying trees as they go. So it's something that, if a landowner were to come in and be interested in planting a 40-acre field into a CP3, it's going to be a very overwhelming task. And I just don't want landowners, I'm not trying to scare anyone away, but I don't want them to think very lightly that it's going to be super easy. They plant the trees and walk away and just enjoy it. It is more of an undertaking. But again, with the CP3 and the conifers, you're allowed to keep enrolling them. So that's pretty nice. So you're allowed to keep working with us to keep your contract looking pretty good. That's a little different than when we go to the next one, which is the CP3A. So this is a hardwood tree planting. The hardwood tree planting, we do allow softwoods in there as well, but this is going to be a planting that doesn't allow you to keep re-enrolling. So with the CP3A, again, you're going to be working with us to come up with what trees are going to work through the tree suitability index based on your soils. We'll also look at, kind of what you're after, if it's wildlife benefits or not. We can look at different tech notes, which will tell us how many stems per acre. But again, this is going to be another one of those plantings that has a lot of landowner inputs with tree protectors, ensuring survivability, maintaining that weed-free seed bed around them. The other difference with the 3A here with the hardwoods is you can use food plots there, but you're not allowed to do the food plots in the conifer one. So slightly different. But again, if this is something that you're really interested in, just keep those thoughts in mind when you come work with FSA. That way you can kind of let them know what your goals are. What are your long-term goals? Is it to put this in and keep, and re-enroll it? Then it's, you're going to be looking at the CP3 and not this 3A. Do you plan on having this in and maybe way down in the future doing some type of a harvest after the fact, or what do you want to do with it? So just keep that in mind. It's definitely something that on a smaller scale, I think works really well. On a larger scale, I think it can definitely get overwhelming. But we're here to help you out with anything that you need, all the steps to go if you're interested in doing a tree planting. So the next one is our wildlife habitat. It's a CP4D. This is kind of an all-encompassing one. If you're more geared to just wildlife and you want to do a little bit of everything, this is probably more suited for you. So with the 4D, we're looking at a mix of every CRP practice that we've covered so far. You can have the cool season introduced grasses in areas. You can have the native grass and wildflowers in different locations. You can have food plots. You can do tree plantings. They allow up to 10% of the enrolled acres to go into tree planting. The thing that separates the CP4D from the rest is that the CP4D has to be accompanied with a wildlife conservation plan. That's something that we would help you out with. But again, that's where we look at our CRP. We look at different tech notes that we have for it. So your tree planting, if we're looking at wildlife conservation, we're going to be looking at a wildlife tree planting. So we could be somewhere in the neighborhoods of over 1,000 trees or 1,000 stems per acre. So again, those are the kind of things that I want everyone armed with when they talk with FSA, that, if you're going to do the full 10% of trees, just kind of be aware up front that, there's the possibility that you may be looking at doing 10,000, or not 10,000, but 1,000 plus stems per acre. So it's a lot of trees, a lot of tree protectors, a lot of input. So it's just something that food for thought as you're going through. But if you're after the general and you're after wildlife, this is probably the best one that you can go with outside of any of the other CRP practices. Now we'll kind of move on to some of the enhancements. So we talked a little bit about the food plots earlier. So CP12 is actually an enhancement that would go within your CRP planting. So with the CP12, you can do those in the CP1, which was the introduced grasses. We could do it in the CP2, which was the native grasses. We could do it in the CP3A, which was the hardwood trees. And we could do it in the CP4 that we just talked about. And you can also do it in a CP25, which will be up in the next slide. But with this, the food plots, there's a lot of different requirements for it. So you can have a perennial or annual. You want to have it no more than 10% of the acres that are offered can be enrolled into the food plot. We want to at least have a food plot of a 1/4 acre in size, and we want no more than 5 acres total. So as long as you kind of fit into those parameters, again, we will work that out with you when you come in and talk with FSA. Later on, you'll work with us with NRCS, and we can kind of go over what you want for the mixes in those food plots. But again, this is something that is going to be agreed upon at the beginning, and this will be for the life of the contract. So if you decide to do a annual food plot every year for the life of the contract, you'll be responsible to put that food plot in that same location. If it's perennial, we'll work with you, get you on a rotation. You know, if you're doing clover or alfalfa, we'll have you probably on a rotation to keep you with mowing it, to keep it the vigor of the stand up. But again, that's something that you want to know where it's going to go ahead of time, because we don't like to move them. Basically, you're going to be getting the cost share and doing all the work to plant the native grasses or the introduced grasses or the trees. And we don't want to have you have to destroy those grasses or trees that you've already paid for and planted to relocate a food plot to that location. So it's something that you definitely want to have written out in your plan ahead of time when you come talk with the FSA of how many acres you're thinking and where you'd like them in the map, and they can work with you on there. So it's something definitely you want to have in your back pocket as soon as you get there. Next, we'll move on to the rare and declining habitat. So these are CP25s. We have 3 different types here that you can choose from. So there's the prairie, the oak savanna, and the lake plain wet prairie. These ones, we typically don't get a lot of them. You have to be in a very specific geographic location identified by pre-settlement vegetation. The prairies and the oak savannas, these are typically found kind of scattered throughout southern Michigan. The lake plain wet prairies, if you're in a county that's bordering one of the Great Lakes, there could be potential that looking through the pre-settlement vegetation that possibly you were in one of these lake plain wet prairies. These require a lot more inputs to the landowner as well. It's a really cool, really diverse plantings for each one. So if it's something that's interesting to you, definitely check them out. But to give you a quick overview, like the prairie planting, for example, would be potentially 5 native grasses with 10 different wildflowers. So there's going to be more incurred cost, a little bit more work, and you got to make sure you're fitting that pre-settlement vegetation map. And when I say pre-settlement vegetation, we're basically looking at maps that indicated what the state looked like before it was settled, basically prior to 1800. Michigan was a state in 1835, so we're looking at stuff even before that, where there was basically zero manipulation to the land. So that's kind of what we're looking for. The oak savanna, you'd be looking at kind of a hybrid, so it would be mimic what the prairie planting is with the grasses and forbs, but they would require 30 trees per acre that are fire resistant, because what we're going to be looking at is mimicking the old oak savannas that were across southern Michigan on some of the states that border us to the south. Basically, they were a product of fire from Native Americans that would set fire to the land to kind of clear the brush. The oak trees would survive that were fire resistant. We kind of have this, savanna landscape, picture Africa with the rolling grasslands with the trees out. So that's kind of what we'd be after with that. Then we have lake plain wet prairie. What we're looking on that is basically going to be what's bordering us around the Great Lakes. These have to have hydric soils. They got to be in the same thing, that pre-settlement vegetation that shows us that there was a lake plain wet prairie there. There's going to be modifications to the hydrology. So we could be looking at tile breaks, ditch plugs, maybe doing push outs, water features. So there's a lot more engineering that goes into that. Again, with that comes a lot more costs and inputs to the landowner. But I don't want to discourage anyone. These are really cool projects. If you happen to be lucky to be in one of those areas that can do it, these are some of the rarest habitats that we used to have in Michigan. So it would definitely be kind of a cool little gem to be part of this and have those put on the landscape. But again, we really don't see a whole lot of them because it's really, really challenging to find those locations and landowners that are willing. But I just want to give you a little information in case you're considering doing one of these, or at least having somebody at FSA or NRCS check to see if you happen to be in one of these pre-settlement vegetation areas. So now we'll go on to the pollinator. So this is what I would kind of liken to a insect food plot. We used to have full field practices like this, but it has changed over the years. And now we're looking at basically just an enhancement that would go within your fruit plot. So I'll kind of cover a little bit on the next slide here for an example of what it would look like. So to the left side, you kind of see that large blue square with the smaller white squares inside of it. The way we would look at that would be the blue area would be your CRP that you've offered. So say you got in a CP1 or the CP2 or one of these CP25s, we would like to see block plantings or strip plantings of the pollinator in there. So there are different requirements for the acreage amounts that's on it. But I just wanted to kind of show a layout of what we're really looking at. They got to be 1 acre in size for a minimum. If you're a block planting, if you're a strip planting, we want to see it at least 20 feet wide and at least a ½ acre in size. But as long as the total adds up to 1 acre, that would meet the minimum requirements. So, and we can't go over 10% of the enrolled fields. But this kind of gives you an idea of what, theoretically your planting would look like if you wanted to put these CP42s in. These are a great way to earn points on those EBI. You can get up to 50 points, which is pretty substantial by implementing CP42 with inside one of your CRP plantings. So now to wrap it all up, I kind of want to talk about how to schedule these appointments. So the main thing is we really want people to call ahead to make appointments with FSA. We know the deadline's the 11th to get your offer in. We wish we had more time to kind of do these workshops sooner to give people the tools they need. But the main thing is contact your local farm service agency. Typically they're located in your USDA office. Most of us are co-located with them, but you're going to want to do it county by county. So whatever county you reside in or that your farm is in, or if you certify with that county, that's who you're going to want to talk to. Call them, schedule an appointment. We are technically closed to the public due to COVID. We're taking CRP by appointment only. So call and make sure your FSA is available for you at those times, because it will take a little bit of time to sit down with them and go over all these questions. Some FSA offices, they do have drop boxes as well. So if you're not able to reach them by phone or it's after hours and you just want to drop something off for a question, a lot of times they have drop boxes there. Make sure that when you do talk to them, you tell them clearly what you're interested in, and that is the general CRP sign up 58. They have a lot of other programs, a lot of other certifications going on. So as long as you kind of be clear of what you're there for, that you want to do the general sign up, they'll schedule an appointment with you. With that, you're going to want to bring in the deed showing that you've owned the land and how long you've owned it. Bring your personal identification with you so they know you are who you are and that you have control of the land. And lastly, if you're not familiar with your local USDA service center, even if you're not interested in the general sign up, it's definitely worth your while to contact them. They can help you out with a farm and tract number, get you started. If you're interested in working with NRCS down the road, typically they go off of FSA's lead. So it's the great place to get the ball started. I highly encourage you to reach out, find out where they are. If you don't know where they are, I think we're going to have a link sent out that will kind of have a list of where to find them. If not, the next slide will have our contact information. Feel free to contact us. We can let you know who's your local FSA office or USDA office. Again, we're typically co-located together, where districts, NRCS and FSA are all under the same roof. We try to do that for landowner convenience, but if not, feel free to contact us. And I think with that, I'm going to stop and open it up for questions, and hopefully we got some good questions.
We do have a couple of questions. It's kind of a quiet crowd tonight. Maybe everybody's just hungry for dinner, or we've done such a good job of putting the information out there that there's little to clarify. But please feel free, participants, keep dropping your questions in the chat if you have them. But for right now, Jim was wondering, he bought a retired farmer's land who was in a rest home for years. So the land was not planted for years. He wants to help the bees and the deer and the grouse and the turkeys. Can he still participate? I'll take a crack at that to start. it comes down to that date range with the cropping history. So if it was not cropped or considered cropped at least 4 years between 2012 and 2017, then it would not be eligible for the CRP sign up. That being said, as we've alluded before, there are other programs that that are potentially available. There's none that are quite as financially advantageous, we'll say, as CRP, but there are other options. So please do get in touch about that still, Jim. Anyone want to add to the answer?
I guess I'll jump on unless Caitlin's on here, but that would be, I could see you probably fitting very well with the Equip, their pollinator programs. They have some monarch recovery initiatives through Equip, and they do basically cost share upfront payments to basically establish pollinator habitat. Part of the requirements is having bees. So if you happen to have an apiary on the property or one within a certain radius, you could potentially qualify for that. I don't know if Caitlin's on. If she's on, she's the RCS DC in Sand. I'll actually probably answer it better than myself, but that would definitely be an option, is reaching out to your local NRCS staff, because they do have a program that sounds like it would fit exactly what you're looking for.
Yeah, Kurt, the Equip program would probably be right up Jim's alley. So definitely contact your local USDA office, and I'm sure whoever the DC is would be happy to chat with you about potential options for the property. And it wouldn't necessarily have to be specific for the monarchs. You know, if you're interested in, like you mentioned, deer, turkeys, there's other possible plantings or habitat improvements that you might be able to do. NRCS also has stuff for forestry. So if you have forest land, that's kind of another pivot that we could potentially assist with, where CRP doesn't do as much work there.
And Jim did chime in that he does have bees, so it looks like it might be a breeze for him to qualify for the EQUIP program, which stands for Environmental Quality Incentives Program. And there are a lot of practices within that, including plantings for pollinators. So great question. Thank you for that. Jim also wondered whether these programs are helpful for land that is being taken over by Phragmites. For those that don't know, that's an invasive species, comes into wet areas, wetlands. So maybe we can just generally answer the question, are these programs helpful for land that's being taken over by invasive species or noxious weeds? My answer for that would be no. Unfortunately, for CRP, you actually need to not have a problem with invasive species or noxious weeds to be able to for that land to be eligible for the program. There is something called a CISMA, a Cooperative Invasive Species Management Area. Every county in the state has a local CISMA, so that would be something to look up, because they're able to provide great resources for dealing with invasive species, maybe not necessarily financial resources, but at least technical information. So that would be a really great thing to look into, and I can find a link and drop that in the chat about that too. Does anybody want to add to that answer about invasive species?
I'll add a quick comment. Through the EQUIP program, there is some money available for invasive species control, generally speaking. So again, that would be a good conversation piece for you to discuss with your local district conservationists and kind of let them know what's going on the land, and then they can come out and take a look at it and make some recommendations.
Thank you for that. Anyone else want to chime in?
Hey, Laura, it's Mike.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm slow. I have Storm the Wonder Dog barking her head off here. Yeah, great comment on the CISMAs. They do cover pretty much everywhere in the state, and there is, depending on the county you're in, there could be money for Phragmites. And I think the places that they have money for Phragmites is along the Great Lakes areas, like Saginaw Bay and some other places like that. If you're more inland, probably not, but definitely if you put that link in there for SISMAs, contact them and they'll let you know exactly what they have money for.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't have time to search and see if I think each SISMA might have its own website, and I don't know, everybody's coming from different counties. So I just put in the chat here the acronym and what it stands for, and you can probably just Google that, those keywords with your county, and if your local SISMA has a website, it should come up. So I recommend finding it that way. So we have one more question that's come up in the chat so far. Sorry, John was wondering, is there any incentive for industrial property? I have over 200 acres that was mined for gravel. Oh, that is an interesting question, and whoever feels like they could address that, feel free to chime in. I am not sure.
I guess I'll take a stab at it. So this Caitlin would probably have to look into this a little bit more, but through EQIP, some of our practice standards do have what is known as like a mining reclamation. So where they would try to reclaim or heal some of the land that was strip mined. So there is a practice standard for that, where we could give technical assistance on. I don't know if there's financial assistance with that. So if that avenue is not a go, potentially working with Fish and Wildlife Services, if they find areas that are maybe productive enough to do some prairie or pollinator restorations, they could potentially help out with that. And they're kind of a cost share kind of landowner match type deal, where they work with you to kind of create a specific conservation plan between you and them of what you want out there. So that would be probably the two options I would look at. Caitlin, and I don't know if there's funding in that abandoned mine reclamation, or if we can just offer technical assistance on it.
That's a really good question. I do know that it is one of our practice standards. I personally don't have too much experience with that, but if it's a practice, there should in theory be cost share that's potentially associated with it. So again, I would say site specific, set up a site visit with your local field office, let them know your goals for the site. Are you wanting to make it wildlife oriented, or is there any areas that have not been touched by the strip mining and we might be able to help focus with that, or as Kurt mentioned, do some reclamation stuff. I'm not super familiar with those practices. I haven't done any of those in Sanilac. So great question, but definitely contact your local office and they can do some digging for you.
Great, thank you for that insight. Looks like we do have a couple links for the SISMA questions. So check the chat if you're interested in looking up your local SISMA. A couple of links in there. Thanks, Mike and Alyssa. We don't have any more questions in the chat right now. We've got just a couple minutes before the 7 o'clock hour. If anybody wants to unmute potentially and ask a question, or feel free to type it in the chat as well. Or maybe you're just hungry for dinner and have all the information that you think that you need for now and are ready to hit the road. Anybody want to unmute? I'll pause for a moment. Not hearing anybody chime in. So I think this would be a great time to wrap up. Thank you all so much for joining today, to the participants and for the agency folks that are able to be here and help us answer questions. We hope that you've gotten a lot of information out of this and that you get in contact with us in the future. So thank you all so much for joining and enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
Yes, thank you. Have a good evening.
There, okay. I wasn't sure if I should end it